we had no earthquake insurance. And so basically it was going to go out of business. Oh, shoot. I don't know how to run a company. And I wouldn't even begin to know how to go out and hire a CEO who said, and it got back to me like, oh, this housewife is going to take this company to its knees. And that was my rocket fuel for many, many years. Like, really? But you are uniquely qualified to run your own company because it's your company. So you get to take it on the journey that it needs to go on, that you want it to go on. And nobody's going to be better at that than you.
Okay, Jean Thompson, I am so delighted to be talking with you today. Just for full disclosure, you and we go way back. And so we're old friends, but you are perfectly suited for the Experiences podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Excited to see you and talk to you today.
Yeah. And we're sitting in the middle of a Seattle springtime, and we have marginally sunny, kind of patchy sunny weather, which in Seattle means it's a fully sunny day. So we have that going for us well. So we should both be happier than usual.
And we are.
You are the CEO of Maeve Chocolate, formerly known as Seattle Chocolate. The way I like to start these podcasts is to kind of bait you. And I'm going to bait you with something I think every CEO should love to share, which is tell me the story. Where did you come from? What's going on with the business? Go as far back as you want to go. And if I hear something I want to tease out of you, I'll definitely do that. But I just want to give you a chance. Tell us about Jean Thompson in the context of Maeve, formerly known as Seattle Chocolate. And the only reason I say that is this is a rebrand that happened relatively recently. So don't forget to cover that, but just take it away.
Yeah, that was 1 year ago. So I have lived in the Pacific Northwest since 1987 when I moved here to work at Microsoft. So I had a tech background in marketing. And then I had my first son, who's now 35 years old. And I decided to stay home. And then I had my daughter, and I ended up staying home for 9 years as an at-home mom, not working. And then when my daughter went off to kindergarten, I was like, okay, I can't be in any more PTA meetings, and I'm going to need more stimulus in my life. And so we were investors in this company called Seattle Chocolate. And I didn't know too much about it. But I was like, you know what? I know marketing. I've even been in sales. Maybe I can just help them because they were really struggling. And at that point, they were about 10 years into their now 35-year-old history. And they just couldn't pull it together. And even the year prior to me joining them, which was 2001, familiar date because of 9/11. But earlier in that year, there was an earthquake in Seattle that destroyed the building that Seattle Chocolate was renting. And we had no earthquake insurance. And so basically it was going to go out of business. But my now ex-husband and I stepped in and paid for the machines to be moved and to retrofit a building with, insulation and air conditioning like a chocolate plant needs. And we became the owners. So by the time 2002 and my daughter went off to kindergarten, we were like, what the heck? They can't cover payroll again. And it was kind of frustrating. And so I'm like, maybe I could just pitch in, not pull a salary, only go when my kids are in school and, coordinate this because I was very committed to being there for my kids and really enjoyed it. And so I did. Long story short, I ended up having to, the person who was running the company, the CEO, would not give me anything to work on. He was very threatened by the owner being involved. And so he ended up quitting. There's more drama there, but I'm not going to talk about it. And then I was left holding the bag like, oh, shoot, I don't know how to run a company and we don't have enough money to even go. I wouldn't even begin to know how to go out and hire a CEO.
That was a classic sink or swim moment for you. I actually had that in my notes. You've spoken about that before in other interviews and podcasts. And how did that permanently shape your leadership style? You're in there as basically a volunteer, part-time. You weren't taking a salary at first, working around your daughter's kindergarten schedule. And there was, some, from what we understand, drama. And in order for this to all work, it was a sink or swim. I've got to step in here and really commit. Has that changed how you do business? Or did it change the way you think about running a company, being involved in this CEO position?
I had never run a company. I never had an accounting class because I went to a liberal arts school that didn't even offer it. I don't think they do still. And I didn't even know what a balance sheet, all that stuff that was required for running a company. I didn't know anything except for marketing, right? And so I really didn't feel confident in doing it. But then I was like, well, it's chocolate. And I've always been a huge chocolate fan. And by that point, it was like 2 months into just having a little exposure to it. And I could see some things that were really broken about how chocolate was being marketed in general. There was no color. There was no appeal to women the way other consumer products try to do. And I thought, I really think I could maybe make a difference. And so I just said, well, what do I have to lose? They're already, almost out of business, not ever able to cover payroll. They were kind of a mess. So I guess I can't blow it any worse. But how it still stays in my leadership style is this sense of like, dare me. Tell me that you don't think I can do it.
Okay.
Because I had people when I decided to run the company who said, and it got back to me like, oh, this housewife is going to take this company to its knees. And that was my rocket fuel for many, many years. Like, really? Okay. And, it took me 9 years to turn this non-profitable company to have even the slightest bit of profit. Many times along the way, I was like, okay, talk about imposter syndrome. I genuinely was an imposter. And I thought, I remember going to an entrepreneur organization meeting, and Mark and I were in the same, what they call forum. And I remember saying, you guys, I know that I'm the worst thing for this company. I think if I were not running it, they would already be so far ahead of the game. And this amazing group of fellow entrepreneurs said to me, you're never allowed to give advice. They said to me, it's funny, but my takeaway was, but you are uniquely qualified to run your own company because it's your company. So you get to take it on the journey that it needs to go on, that you want it to go on. And nobody's going to be better at that than you. That was the moment that I was like, oh, I get it. However long this takes me and however painful it is for me and everyone along the way, it's going to be my journey. And that's still the way it is today for me.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people who have jumped in, kind of a sink or swim type of thing, learn pretty quickly. Once they get past the worst part of imposter syndrome is like, wait a second. There's not usually a grand plan for success. It's getting in, persistently grinding, figuring it out. What is it about this business? What is it about these customers? And I'm sure you've had this experience when you're encouraging young entrepreneurs or people who are interested. Like, listen, there's no level of preparation that's going to prepare you to do what you need to do if it's truly a good opportunity. And thinking back to that moment, so you and your husband at the time were rescuing the business already with machinery, and then it was with your labor. You got some observability to what was going on. And you're saying, this is going to be a lost investment unless we step up. You stepped up, and in that moment, as you described, you're like, there's clearly things to do. I clearly have marketing and communication skills. How desperate was it? And can you go back to that time and describe at least one or two of those visceral feelings and then compare it to where you are today and kind of looking back through time? What would you tell yourself in that moment?
I guess I would tell myself, just cut yourself some slack, man. I mean, you're not going to figure this out right away. I remember one time, talk about visceral, I was super angry at my sales team for dissing on the first Valentine heart that anyone had ever come up with at the company. I was like, we're going to do. And one of the guys said, oh, that just doesn't move me. And I nearly came unglued to the point where I ended up, I'm like, I just need to leave. So I got in my car, I remember a little slug bug. And I was driving home and I started feeling like my heart racing and palpitations. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm having a heart attack. And I remember I'm like 40.
Yeah.
And so I got on the phone and I called 911 and they were like, pull over now. And I was like, no, I think I'm fine to drive someplace. Like, no, pull over now. And then they blocked my cell phone. And where I was the entrance to 520's bridge going eastbound. And so I blocked traffic. It was a nightmare. Turns out it was a panic attack I was having. The first and only one I've ever had in my life. But that was the level of how seriously I was taking this and how hard I was on myself and how emotional I've always been about this job. It is so personal. And it caused me physical pain. So Now I can tell you that I still have those moments where I'm like, oh, is this a mistake? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And, it doesn't get to panic attack anymore, but, there's some questioning that continues to go on even after 23 years.
You have more tools in your toolkit, even if you experience some of that anxiety and a degree of that panic. What is one of those most important tools that you have? And we're going to get into what has happened and how you've led Seattle Chocolate in, quite frankly, a remarkable direction. But, if we think about a toolkit and you have crescent wrenches and needle nose pliers, what is the metaphorical equivalent that you pull out with some frequency to handle the pressure of this job?
Well, the first thing I have to do is go for some sort of exercise. Ideally, it's outside, hiking, getting that cardio up and just breathing fresh air. And if I can find a tree, that's all the better. But I will say the other toolkit that I have, which is so much more than a wrench or needle nose, is my team, right? So the thing I think I'm most proud of that I've done the best over the years is assemble this amazing team of people who, that's the first thing I do is I call them together and we're like, what do we do? And they all have different perspectives of different ideas. And then I have such confidence that as a team, we're going to be able to wrestle anything to the ground.
So jumping back to this sudden kitchen remodel thing, there was that, you stepped into the CE role around 2002, correct? And that was after that literal earthquake, not a metaphorical, a literal earthquake condemned the production facility, and your previous CEO quit just 6 weeks into you being there. Okay. You had, as you mentioned, no C-suite experience, and you were basically tackling a company that literally had just been rocked by an earthquake, but there was one disaster at a time, starting with, and I quote, a shipping department where the employee would just yell, "What do you want?" at people.
Yeah.
So what was the absolute most WTF, what have I gotten myself into moment during those early days? Did you ever have the urge to just walk away? We're talking table flip, mic drop. And if so, how did you resist that urge? Because, and the reason I ask that is that people that listen to this podcast, they might be interested in Gene Thompson and chocolate in general, or experiences, right? Which is what our company is all about. But I think a lot of people are really interested in that founder story. And we have a misappropriation of the smooth sailing that comes from an excitement we have over a business or an opportunity. But you are the epitome of things going wrong. So what was the biggest WTF moment, and how did you resist just walking away?
There were so many. I was actually thinking, would I pick one? Is there one that's sort of more representative than others? It's a manufacturing facility in Seattle, Washington. It's a warehouse. It's multifaceted. I remember my father saying to me, "Yeah, you should be able to turn this thing around in about 12 weeks." And, it took me 9 years. So, but I think that I remember the warehouse was too small because we had to secure it during and immediately after an earthquake. And so there was no room to even walk around, the various boxes and cardboard and things. And it was just, I literally saw people climbing up to find a particular part. And then on top of the shipping person being so rude and so many people, you could tell where the weak parts were, just common sense, right? I mean, a human being. But I think the thing that really flipped me on my ear, but I never was ever tempted to quit, I have to answer that right out, was we had one bar at the check lane of Target. Okay, so at that point, how many thousands of, hundreds of stores did Target have? And we were this small little company. And so it was a very critical part of our business. I mean, it was probably, 25% of our sales. And we went through a distributor, and the distributor went Chapter 11. And they had 2 truckloads of my chocolate en route. And if anybody's ever experienced that before, basically you don't get paid. And anything 6 months, I think it is, prior to that doesn't get paid for either. And it just blew my mind. I had never realized that this big company could take a little company and put it out of business and do it so callously, because of course they're back in business today and we never got paid for those things. And
correct me if I'm wrong, because this has happened to another mutual friend of ours, a baby products company, and they had, when you rely on distributors, they basically own that product. And if they go into, or a retailer goes into receivership or bankruptcy, all your products get seized. You can't get those products back. And so once they leave your dock, they're not yours anymore, yet you haven't been paid for them. And how can you absorb that kind of disaster? Is that exactly what was going on here?
Yeah, exactly. And we just lost more money. We were already losing money. It just got worse. And I will say that this company relied on my amazing right place at the right time at Microsoft for its success, because I had to fund it. Like, I literally had to take out a home equity loan for probably the first 12 years of my 23 years at Seattle Chocolate. No bank would give me a loan because the company's financials were so bad. Yeah. So, I never gave up.
Yeah. You are a believer. I mean, I'm not saying that other entrepreneurs don't do that, but think about that, listeners. Think about what it takes to have that resolution that you're going to, mortgage your future. And okay, Gene, give yourself some slack here. But was this a stubborn bulldog kind of just like, I don't want an identity play where like, I won't quit? Or was it that, and this is a good product. This product should be in the world. This is a good industry. I believe in this. What was the mix there for those who are struggling right now?
I think it kind of changed over the course of like sort of chapters. The first chapter, when I always loved chocolate, but I didn't really understand the industry. I didn't understand the supply chain at that point. I didn't have time, right? That's what motivates me now. But early on, it was this need to not fail, which is just definitely part of my DNA.
Why? Why do you need to not fail?
I feel like a loser. Like, I guess I have like some deep rooted insecurity that proving myself and accomplishing something that I knew was really hard, it helped me, right? It helped me feel better about myself. So it's like, I'll be damned. There was also the people, that were like, yeah, she's never going to be able to do this, or, this is Jean's folly. I love to tell a story of when I was getting a divorce from my now ex-husband. I had a financial advisor, and we had two properties. We had like less than half of Ferrari of Seattle and 100% of Seattle Chocolate. And I was working at that point. I've been working there almost 10 years. It was my baby and third baby. And the financial advisor said to me, take Ferrari. And I'm like, I don't want Ferrari. I'm Seattle Chocolate, right? He's like, yeah. You should not be taking Seattle Chocolate. It'll basically destroy your financial future, kind of thing. And I did it anyway, because I was like, I loved that company by that point, right?
Yeah. And that passion as a currency, or passion as a weird form of venture capital when you're not getting venture capital or loans from banks, is, the greatest foundation for future success, right? We've heard this. We've heard that if you can't wake up in the morning, lift your head off the pillow and say, I want to tackle the problems, the inevitable challenges in this business, then I'm going to fail. It doesn't matter what underpinning I have. Would you say that is a true thing for you in Seattle Chocolate, that had you taken on Ferrari, I mean, you probably would have done well in that, knowing you?
To this day, 23 years in, with, I'm going to say near 100% of my peers being retired, and, I probably should retire, air quoting it right now. I look forward to every day that I go to that office.
Oh, that's great.
I love it so much, right? Because it's such a learning opportunity every single day. No 2 days are the same. And it's fun. And I get to work with Gen Zs and millennials and people of all generations. And they're all on my team, right? So it's super fun. It fills my needs as an extrovert. It fills my needs as someone who really wants to be a lifelong learner.
Hey, it's Mark, your podcast host, and also the CEO of our sponsor, the Experiences app. If you sell experiences alongside your products on Shopify, bookable tours, classes, tastings, adventures, Experiences is the booking system built for you. What our merchants love about it is your customers book directly on your store, same checkout, same branding, same domain, no third-party redirect, not a separate system that's going to confuse you or your customers. It lives right inside Shopify, and it's trusted by thousands of merchants worldwide, and it's free to get started with a 14-day trial. So search Experiences in the Shopify App Store, or just go to experiencesapp.com. Okay, back to the show. the business world worships at the altar of hypergrowth. And my research said that somewhere you said you were looking at the business journals and you were looking at these lists and you're like, okay, bigger's better. But apparently chasing growth almost caused the demise of your business. What is the brutal truth about scaling a physical product business that the startup world just doesn't understand or refuses to talk about?
There was one year, and we were only like a $3 million revenue business. There was one year where we lost over 2 million.
Oh my goodness.
Net loss. It's like, oh no. If I really didn't know what I was doing and I was learning the hard way for sure. I think it's very difficult to do a manufacturing plant as well. It takes a tremendous amount of cash, right? And with no financial background, I didn't really understand that. And it took me a long time. And the hiring of this consultant who really has turned just changed the trajectory for this company. Such a great advisor. And I finally understood the importance of cash. Like how can you possibly take on that level of growth, because it's the top 50 fastest growing, youngest, fastest, always fastest. And plus I'm fast, right? So I wanted fast.
Yeah.
And, no, quite the opposite. Once I realized slow, and there's a certain percentage, I even asked this advisor, I'm like, how fast can I grow before it's too much for cash? And, he basically was like, if you grow, 10%, you're pushing it, right? And so I have some sort of guidelines now, and I understand the balance sheet and, things that most people would come right out of business school or even, university understanding and would help them. So as I say, the company had to survive my learning curve.
Yeah. A little bit of a promotion for EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, which is where we met. They had this course. I actually have the folder back there somewhere, but me and my CTO went and took this course, and it was Profit Mastery is what it was called. I don't know if you ever took that course.
I did.
And he really focuses on the difference between your profit and loss and your balance sheet. And one of the early lessons you learn in that course is, look at this company. Isn't it amazing? Look how fast it's growing. Look at all the sales, and it's about to go bankrupt, right? Profitability does not equal sustainability, because if your balance sheet, that cash on hand, cannot support sales and operations, you're sunk. Receivers will start to show up. So in a product business, maybe yours isn't as cash intensive as someone who's ordering crates of product from China. You still have, from the moment you make that product and ship it, you don't get paid typically for quite a while, right? Or is that not the case in the food industry?
I got to be on the worst end of the deal, quite frankly, because, cocoa doesn't grow in the United States, except for Hawaii in very limited quantities. It grows really far away. And so in order to, you have to order that. You have to sometimes pay those poor farmers even in advance. And then you got to have the processing happen. The beans then have to be, fermented and dried and then roasted and all of that. And then it starts my manufacturing process. And I have to have it, done with enough quantity to take on what used to be an incredibly hockey stick of a seasonality graph. I mean, we sold like 70% of our product between the months of October and January. We're down now to that being like maybe 30% or maybe 40%.
Nice. Wow.
Since I included a fourth month. So we've really, sort of flattened it out by going into like the grocery channel where people do buy and eat chocolate every day. It's not so seasonal around a gift. So between the seasonality and just so I would say it probably takes us, so we make our own dark chocolate now. This is something that's just a 2-year-old endeavor. We used to buy chocolate and turn it into a confection. And so making your own chocolate actually has even a longer period of time before you get paid. But you get to control how it's sourced and how the farmers are paid and then ultimately what it tastes like, which was really important to me. So yeah, it takes, we don't get paid for 4 months.
Yeah.
4 to 6 months. Yeah.
So to grow your business by $1 million, you've probably got to have $3 million to I don't know, to fund that from the time you source. I don't know. I'm just back of the envelope math, and I'm definitely not an accountant.
Yeah, you're pretty good. Let me tell you. We have a $3 million revolving line of credit. We almost never tap into it anymore because we've got enough cash ourselves to sustain us most of the year, which is, again, major milestone. an accomplishment. But yeah, just in case, because stranger things have happened, that we do use it or we have it. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about that growth versus, I'm going to use a strange word here, contentment. If you have a business, and this is something I don't think a lot of people know, because the news you read is about the standouts, whether those standouts are profitable or not. They're the brands that are everywhere. And I got to be honest, I see your stuff everywhere I go, but I'm also looking for it. I'm focused on the brands of my friends. What is your mindset about being a ubiquitous, everywhere kind of brand versus a fantastic company that has solid profits from regular cash flows that provides a certain quality of life for those involved? Why would you choose to stay a certain size or not stress your future trying to become something that you aren't right now?
Mostly we've just sort of now have settled into the growth has to be organic. Like it has to be the right retailer and the right product, and it has to make sense for everybody. And that sort of naturally results in slower growth, right? And I have never wanted to flip this company and make the huge windfall profit. My hope is to never have to sell this company and to be able to turn it over to my daughter, who's worked there now for 7 years. So we are an evergreen company, and that changes your mindset. Like you want to make sure that you're paying attention to the product, to the people, to the profitability, to everything in order to be able to deliver for the long haul, right? It was one of the reasons that we did that rebrand a year ago. And that makes me content, right, to know. But I will say that there is part of me that feels an obligation to the farmers at the root of the supply chain. It's a very troubled supply chain for cocoa, and probably a lot of people have heard, but probably most people have no idea what I'm talking about. The farmers are all in these sort of developing nations, equatorial nations, and they have never been fairly paid ever. And they barely eke out survival, right? And so what happens is they can't reinvest in the trees. And as they get older and their younger kids can see that, wow, you can make a living as a programmer, online, they don't want to be farmers anymore. And it's just a whole complexity around the supply chain. My feeling is because of the size of my business, it's somewhat unique. I'm not huge like Hershey, and I don't have to answer to a board of directors that demand profitability. I only have to answer to myself. And yet I have machinery that can make in one shift, I can make probably 1.5 million pounds of chocolate a year. So it's kind of a sweet spot where we pay attention to the way that we're sourced, the quality of the ingredients. We have the ability to do it even if there's no profit, right? For example, we use a compostable twist wrap for our little bonbons. And there's only one vendor in the whole world that has developed that technology, and they're in the UK. And so they're a lot more expensive, and you're more vulnerable to not having a second source. And initially when we took it in, it was like jamming up the machines, and I was driving my operations person crazy. She's like, we're not a tiny company anymore. We can't do it. And I said, then figure out how you do it. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it? You think Hershey's going to do that? No, they're going to use plastic. It's cheaper. It holds up better to the channel, et cetera, et cetera. So I have the ability to make decisions that I think are going to help with the long-term health of the entire category. Cannot do it alone. All people in the industry have to make an effort to save the farmers. But back to my original point, the bigger I get, the more reaching. And the reason we wanted to do Maeve Chocolate's rebrand was because it wasn't regionally named, and we could reach out to all 50 states and get more people in our posse, more people that will spend more, that understand and care about those, those principles, and will ultimately result in a better world and better future for cocoa.
I love it. I want to talk about that rebrand, but I also want to point out ethical leadership here. And the capitalism is not a bad thing. But capitalism without a strong ethical underpinning, caring for people, loving society, and sometimes loving people isn't always giving them what they want, it's giving them what they need, right? Your supply chain isn't necessarily going to want to return more value to those farmers. But that supply chain needs is to really recognize the people at the source of the product and take care of it. We've heard about this in coffee. I learned from you quite a while ago that this is an issue with cocoa. And you did some travel, by the way. Do you want to speak to that really quickly? You got some boots on the ground. You went and you saw. What did you see, and how did that impact you?
Well, I've probably been over the last, 10 or so years to 5 or 6 different origin countries. I've been quite a lot to South and Central America. We do a lot of sourcing from Peru. But I guess it must have been 2 years ago, my daughter Ellie and I went to Ghana. Now, I'd never been to West Africa, but, Ivory Coast and Ghana, adjacent countries, are the number 1 and 2 cocoa growing regions in the world, with 70% of the world's cocoa coming from them. And we were sourcing from Ghana, which is much smaller than the Ivory Coast in this regard. But, it's a really different trip. It's not ecotourism. There are no resorts. The people are absolutely beautiful and happy and very productive. But they experienced some hardship. So anyway, went, long, long drives into the bush from, the Accra, and then staying in a hotel where literally the comforter or the blanket that was on my bed was covered with what appeared to be goat hair or something. I was so itchy. Oh my God, things like that, right? And there was no food that night after the day visiting the farms. So yeah, different world.
Yeah.
But such an interesting experience. The flip side of that is, meeting with all of the tribal leaders and having them never having tasted a piece of chocolate before. And we donate and we put in a well and we put in some seedling nursery. And this is where the 10% of our net profits goes to right now. And so they were like, this is amazing. And, they didn't even necessarily share the same language among the 10 tribes that are all part of this co-op, this organic co-op that we source from. But they were so appreciative, and they had every single person in their villages come out to have a presentation. They danced, they read poetry, they did all this stuff for us, the kids. It was so meaningful. You're like, wow, you're really, really moving the needle in this tiny little place in the world. But that feels very gratifying.
That's amazing to me that the people that produce the core material to make chocolate had never tasted chocolate.
No, that's very common.
And the average Western mind can't even conceive of that. We think, they're probably making a lot of their own chocolate products, but they're just not. They don't have the capacity, the knowledge, or the desire, maybe even to do it. But what was it like the first time they tasted that? Was it, how did they, as far as you could tell, create this end-to-end connection? It's the final step in to the first step. It's that deep connection. What was their response?
They definitely understood the connection because they know where their product goes, right? And they've heard this thing, chocolate, that, Westerners go crazy over. But it was so funny. It's so hot there. Okay. It is in most cocoa growing regions, but I found Ghana at that particular time of year to be extremely hot. I was like, red in the face. And so I brought chocolate. By the time I handed it to one of the chiefs, it was completely melted within the wrap. I was I'm still going to give it. I don't really have a choice. And so he doesn't know probably that it was supposed to be solid. Anyway, he opened it and, it was dripping all over the place. He loved it. But of course, he's tasted raw beans and it really doesn't taste that similar by the time you add milk. This was a milk chocolate bar that I happened to give him, and, sugar and various things and mint or whatever flavor that one was.
Yeah, well, that's really neat. Let's talk about the flipping the script on marketing to women. So one of the things you've spoken about is how you realize that the chocolate industry was stuck on an outdated loop of marketing to men, buying gifts for women. And so it looks like what you did, and this is, I think, from your words, you hijacked the cosmetic and fashion industry tactics using bright colors. And now this is where we're going to talk about Maeve, because I got to tell the listeners, if you guys don't have any conception of what Seattle Chocolate was, a regional play, right? And I'm going to tell you something funny, a conversation I had in the gym this morning with my friend who's familiar with Seattle Chocolate in a second. But you've gone from a respectable, semi-elegant, maybe a little bit stuffy brand that was a regional play into something that, quite frankly, I don't know that I've seen a more fantastic rebrand that kept nothing of the former identity. Like, it's so exciting. If you go to Maeve Chocolate's dear listener, Maeve, is it chocolates.com, Maeve Chocolates, or just search for it, right?
Yeah. I think it was a singular chocolate,
Yeah,
maevechocolate.com.
Maeve Chocolate. It's engaging, it's fun, it feels interactive, there's a lot of motion. So you rebranded the company to Maeve, which has a bit of the naming is after a kind of a gnarly first century Irish warrior princess. Just talk
Queen.
about
She was a
Queen.
queen.
Sorry, my bad. So talk about how you rebelled in this rebrand from the stuffy, serious wait for a gift chocolate trope, and then said we're going to hit women directly. And how hard was it to convince the old guard of retail that you had something worth leaning into? And how does this Irish warrior queen embody this whole rebellion that you are fomenting?
So I will say that my journey on this targeting, like deliberately targeting women and utilizing color, as you said, borrowing it from other industries that were directly targeting women, started almost right away. So 23 years of developing it and sort of evolving the brand and trying to take the price up so that we could pay more. All of that was a slow process. There's no way we could have done it that massive of a rebrand. I wouldn't even known what to do in the early days. So it was all sort of a necessary part of the foundation. And we just kept running into blockades as we were trying to go into, because we were sold in all 50 states for many, many, many years. But like a eager retailer would like, we love this product and we love all the ethics behind it. We'll take it in, and then it wouldn't get pulled off the shelf. And then they would have to cancel us. So we were running into that too many times, and we could see that it was holding us back. I never liked the name, but I was like, oh, it's too late, year 10 into its history. And then in year 33, I actually did it, right? So it took my daughter really joining, and I knew that it was kind of a little too, it just wasn't very representative of my taste and, sort of the company's sense of humor and the company's personality, but it was what Seattle Chocolate was, right? And it was beautiful. We got lots of compliments on our packaging, et cetera. My daughter's like, Mom, this is boring. In my generation, they don't want it. And I love the brand, I love the chocolate, but this is not the way we should be conveying. And I'm like, okay, I 100% agree. What do we do? And that's when we decided together to rebrand it. And then that was a couple of years in the doing and developing. And we decided, and maybe it was terribly crazy, to throw everything that we didn't like out and start all over. Because once just do it once, right? Because people were like, oh, why don't you make like the West Coast, or at least the Pacific Northwest, still stay Seattle Chocolate? And then I'm like, no, it's all or nothing. And I want my people in the Pacific Northwest to have the very best product. I don't want them having something that is safe, right? No, that isn't who we are. And that's not what they want. I also were trying to not only, we continued targeting women, but this one almost targets women less. It's more of a 50-50, I would say.
Okay.
But it's skewing. Well, we say we still target women. It's skewing younger. That's what we needed, because today's consumer is younger. They're not boomers and Gen X anymore. It's the millennials and the Gen Z who have the buying clout. We also needed to sort of invest in the future and make sure that it was something that could last. And so we went a little crazy.
So I spoke of this conversation I had in the gym today, and my workout buddy is a guy named Todd. He's like, what are you up to today? It's like, oh, I'm talking to Gene Thompson, the CEO of Seattle Chocolate. I was like, formerly Seattle Chocolate, it's Maeve. And he said, oh, Seattle Chocolate changed their name. And I'm like, yeah. He's like, oh, I don't know if that was a good idea. So you probably got a lot of that, especially for people around here. And that's maybe the point. People around here were familiar with that brand. And to your point, you did some really courageous things with the packaging. I think you have artist collaboration stuff. It was, when you see it on the end cap or in the chocolate aisle, it really pops. It was beautiful and engaging. How has it gone since you've rebranded as Maeve?
Yeah, it's literally been a year and a month since we did it, so it's pretty fresh, and I believe that it's evolving, and it's probably almost too soon to say it was a success, but I feel like it was a success. So I got that a lot, as you can imagine, because nobody does that. It's insane to do that, right? We knew we needed to, because the name was, in my opinion, so bad, right? And then all the change where it wasn't even really recognizable anymore. If you were a big fan of San Juan sea salt, It used to look like this, and now it has like a pirate ship on it and an octopus. I mean, it looks vastly different and may not be recognizable.
Right.
So that was very risky, right? But as I said earlier, you go big or you go home. But what was interesting is that I was part of the sales team that went to at least 75 different retailers, distributors, or major accounts, a year before to sort of prepare them and to tell them what was happening. And we were expecting some major blowback from like the QFCs, the Met Markets, the ECCs. No, every one of them was like, we love it. We love it. And it's great. And we were like, wow.
That's
It's
fantastic.
almost like one person who was like, I'm just really worried about it not saying Seattle anymore. And I said, name one other brand that says Seattle on it. There isn't one. And there's a reason.
I was in Hagen's, and where Seattle chocolate stuff used to be, there was Maeve. And I'm thinking, this has got to be Seattle chocolate, because it still has, it took some of that energy and the vitality from some of the new packaging you were doing with Seattle chocolate, or new.
Yeah.
What it had become.
Stuff.
The seasonal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to let you go. I'm going to release you. So I can kind of drag on, because the more we talk, the more I'm like, oh, I have this question. I remember when I was in EO with you, when we were in our forum, you had made this move to set up and this is really just an aside, in the SeaTac airport. Just a little spot. And I remember you were telling me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a way bigger challenge, way more expensive than I anticipated. What is it about retail and airports that is worth doing or not worth doing? You're now, do you still have a space there? I believe you do.
Yeah,
I've walked. I think it was closed last time I went by.
Because they're fixing the floor.
How has that gone?
It's been an amazing success. And I will say that it is, despite the fact that, obviously it's very expensive to be in the airport because it's such primo real estate, such great traffic of new people, international people, whatever. It's been our most profitable piece of business with all those added expenses. We only have a 10 by 20 space. It's like a trade show booth. But it's in a really great location right at Concourse C. And we sell a ton of product through there, and people plan it for when they're bringing gifts. And some people there were kind of unhappy that it didn't say Seattle on it anymore. Well, that's why I brought it as a gift, right? And I'm like, well, it says Seattle Chocolate presents Maeve on everything, so it's written on there, So it's just an adjustment. And they were like, "Why did you cancel champagne?" And there was so much outrage over the loss of that bonbon flavor that we actually are bringing it back. And yeah, people don't like change, and they really don't like when you don't ask them for their opinion about the change. But the airport has been a mess. Can I just say, I love the Port of Seattle. I think they're fantastic partners. But the remodel, the TSA, it's just been a difficult airport. And so this last year has been not our best year, but we're patient, and we have faith that it'll be better than it ever has been.
Well, I love it. And I knew that I was in Singapore a few weeks back, meeting with a client. And it's customary when you travel to that part of the world to bring a gift, and you especially want to bring it from your hometown. I'm like, well, 100% I'm bringing Maeve. And so I bought a stack of chocolates from Maeve, and it was fantastic. My CTO is from Romania, former Seattle guy. And he lives in Romania now. So he brought some interesting food from Romania. I brought some stuff from Seattle, and you were featured. And it's interesting how chocolate it's so very portable, and it's such a regional thing. Of course, where the beans come from is from Seattle. But it is a fantastic gift to take. Okay, I have two more questions. The first question is going to be elevating the value of chocolate. From a cheap cheap gas station consumption to something that's a little bit more like a bottle of wine, because you do have different tiers of chocolate. You have Maeve, which is a little bit more accessible than your Jacoco. I think that's how you say that.
Yeah,
JCOCO. And we didn't really talk about that. Happy to have you just touch on that really quick. But let's start with that, and then we'll talk about the experiential stuff you do.
Yeah, I think that chocolate has had quite a journey. It's one of the oldest products in the world, and it started as like the food and the drink of kings, right? It was currency. And then I think the American chocolate makers took it down. Like they added so much sugar, took out so much cocoa, and gave it a price point. It became a Halloween candy, essentially. Nothing wrong with that, right? But it doesn't really showcase the beauty of this crop called cacao, that has got more sort of antioxidants and health benefits and all kinds of polyphenols and chemicals, if you will, it's the most complex product in the world, like so much more complex than a grape or wine.
Okay.
And so when properly processed and, fermented, a lot of people don't even know it's a fermented food, right? It can be such a delicacy, but there's so many hands that touch that has to be a lot more expensive, especially if you want to pay the farmers, ethically and fairly. And people didn't understand that. So or maybe still don't. I think more and more they are, because there's lots of people in what's called the fine chocolate sector that are telling that story and delivering absolutely exquisite, beautiful chocolates that are like a journey of tasting. And I personally don't think they pair well with wine, but it's that same type of like really savor it and understand it and ask where it came from and what was the terroir and what percent cacao it is and the region of the world that it's from, because it's all vastly different. It's fascinating.
Is price both those considerations and an economy of scale? How do the big chocolate brands make their chocolate so much cheaper than some of these third wave, or what do we call these, gourmet chocolate companies like yourself?
Well, they don't put much chocolate in there for starters. There's even like a big thing right now with Hershey's saying, okay, we'll put chocolate back in our bars, because there was a crisis in 2024 that, there was not enough cocoa to go around. Long story short, it tripled the price of the commodity. And of course, that impacts the cost of chocolate in a very, very big way. And also was even difficult to get. And so that was the point where the big boys, who do have, a board of directors and investors to answer to, stopped really putting it in some of the products, and they never put very much in. So like, I don't know an exact number, but I think a Hershey Special Dark has something like, 20% cocoa in it. And anybody else would expect a dark to be at least 60% cocoa, right? So they don't use as much because it's the most expensive part of the bar. And that's how they're able to do it. But you know what? They're not saying this is a high cacao. They're saying it's a delicious candy bar.
When I go buy a nicer chocolate bar, I expect to pay between $5 and $10 for that bar. And that is a reasonable price to pay. And it's not necessarily just loaded with reams of profit. Is it a reasonable price with reasonable margin for the manufacturer?
It's tight. So the J Coco bar you were referring to is, I think, like $12 or $13 retail, and Maeve is $7.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah, and so $7 is a really good price point for what they're getting. And how we do that is just volume and efficiencies. I have an amazing operation, and so we have. After 35 years, we've gotten pretty good at it, and we are able to do it. Our margins are pretty good. And at the end of the day, our profit margin is very low, right? You don't make a ton of money in chocolate, but you make enough money to support 75 families and have a good time and be content, as you said earlier. And also, I think, make a difference.
Thank you for that insight. Okay, so our last talking point here is experiences and world building as a business moat instead of just fighting for grocery store shelf space. So I remember when you first built your tour experience at your flagship store in Tukwila. That was a really neat thing. The gantry, the walkway, getting to taste the chocolate, your fun showroom. And then I went to one of your pop-ups in Pioneer Square, which was fantastic. Some of my employees later, I don't know if they saw a picture of me there from one of their friends took. It actually elevated my reputation among my younger female employees as a boss. They're like, were you at that amazing J Coco chocolate pop-up in Pioneer Square? I was like, yeah, I was there. What do you mean? It's like, oh my gosh, it was all over Instagram at the time. So you're creating these wild, immersive physical experiences. We haven't talked about this in a long time. I don't know how often you're doing these, but you have the factory tours with Krakens and haunted escape rooms to sell a consumer packaged good. So in an era where most brands are just buying Instagram ads, how is this kind of immersive world building or just the experiential acting as a competitive moat for your business, if you measure that at all?
We don't really measure it, but we believe that, chocolate is more than just a snack. There's so much about it, but we think that experiencing and being able to immerse yourself and learn more about it is critical to the future of chocolate also, right? Because once you go on a tour and you know what I've been explaining to you today, it's kind of hard to, buy a $3 bar again, because most people would be like, I know that I'm not paying the farmers fairly and that doesn't feel good. But also we're just having a lot of fun, like we just 3 days ago, whatever it is, launched a collaboration with a local author, Matt Dinniman's like New York Times blockbuster bestseller book that's, lit RPG. I mean, great, because it was my daughter's favorite book, and it's called Dungeon Crawler Carl. And it went crazy when we launched it on Wednesday. We sold out of what we thought was going to be our entire year's supply of bars in 36 hours. And so now we're like, oh my God, scrambling to get more cherries, scrambling to get more wrap. But so it's like kind of the first time that we've ever kind of gone viral. And it was this like really tapping into our audiences, what they choose to read and what they love. And, they were like, oh my God, now I have a bar that goes with my favorite character. And that's an experience, right? That's just making it a slightly different experience for people where the book can come to life.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And the experience economy, which is what our technology helps facilitate, is all about the experience economy's experience, or it's travel, sports, entertainment, and dining. And you're in that consumable space. But entertainment and consumption is happening at Maeve Chocolate, at the factory, and with some of these pop-ups, and even somewhat passively when you do these collaborations, right? And they just show up and they go viral. One last question about experiences. One of the things we see with our clients who are doing experiences is, sure, it's about the consumption of the good, or the product. But what's really happening is besties, families, friends, date nights are coming in there. They're creating a durable, positive memory together with the experience provider's brand at the nucleus. Have you witnessed that kind of thing happening with Seattle Chocolate in the past and now Maeve at the center? And how do you feel about that role that you're playing in at least the local experience economy?
Oh, I think it's very gratifying. I mean, we see like multi-generations, like a 9-year-old and his or her mother and grandmother all coming and learning together and tasting together. And you see like a lot of like assisted living homes will come, and it's like their field trip for the week, and they love it so much. And then we have school groups coming, and then sometimes companies will do their meetings or offsites there, kind of thing. So we do feel like we want to be part of the local fabric, and it seems to be an effective way because everybody wants to see how things are made.
Yeah, no, I love factory stuff, by the way. It's one of my favorite things to do. Okay, as we end today, how can we best engage Maeve Chocolate? Where can we find you? What do you recommend for us? What's the best way for people, maybe especially people who aren't in the Seattle area, to get a taste, so to speak, of your company?
I guess visiting the website, not only it's very technicolor, crazy fun. We're developing like a whole world of fantasy characters, because the bar will have like a bear on it for the Blackberry, and we're bringing her to life. And then there's the Moon Rocks bar, which has, Greg Glitter, Space Hunk on it. So we're doing like storytelling and fantasy around our line alone. And you can see that on the website. And it's going to be developed more and more. We're going to put a game on there, and we're wanting it to be interactive. If you live local, the best thing is to come to our store, take a tour, and understand and see the breadth of line we have. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. We have a lot of SKUs, a lot of fun flavors. And I guess that's, eat the bar and imagine the farmer that was at the very start of the whole process.
Yeah, that is something we always want to keep in mind. And it's a multi-sensorial reflection that you can have while you're eating a Maeve chocolate bar. So you can find Maeve Chocolate at maevechocolate.com. That's MAEVE chocolate.com. You can order straight from their site. You can book a factory experience. And J Coco is also, there's a link to the jcocochocolate.com website if you want to have an elevated chocolate experience. Jean, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me and our listeners. And I really appreciate your brand. You especially, I consider you a fantastic friend and your role in the Pacific Northwest food economy.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and about my favorite subject, chocolate.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on.